resurrection, therefore, Jesus is asked, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. The Sadducees are a religious sect of Jesus' time who, as the story tells us, do not believe in resurrection. In fact, believe that there is definitely no resurrection, for, of course, resurrection does not make any sense. If there is a resurrection, they asked, how could she be married to 7 men all at the same time? How can this life, in which for her there were these 7 marriages, one after another, continue on in some way to the next? Who would she be? They ask rhetorically. Whose would she be? They are trying to trap Jesus into following their very clear logic that resurrection, a life beyond this life, does not, in fact, make any sense. And they're correct. Resurrection does not make sense. The author, Debbie Thomas, who writes gorgeous essays about scriptures that we hear on Sundays, writes that resurrection means living in circumstances that should render living impossible. That resurrection means living in circumstances that should render living impossible. If one has died, how can one live? It should be impossible. And so the Sadducees come up with this story. It's a concoction, it's a work of rhetoric about this woman, an extremely vulnerable widow who is passed on from one man to the next as the norms of their society at that time, just to trip up Jesus and get him to agree that their logic holds. For resurrection does not follow logic. It does not make sense. It means living in circumstances that render living impossible. It means living even when there is death. It means living after death. Resurrection means enduring and overcoming and persisting and surviving when that should not be possible. It means being whole when we are broken. It means being healed when we are hurt. It means life when life should be impossible. When we are hurting, when we are grieving, we cannot help but ask some similar questions as Jesus is asked today. The Sadducees are not the first nor the last to ask questions about how resurrection could be possible, how impossible it sounds. When faced with impossibility, our minds cannot help but race and plow through any possible circumstance. What does this mean? What does this look like? In the resurrection, who will I be? Whose will I be? Who will I see, and what will they look like, and what age will they be, and will they be married or not married? What is this all about? At the heart of resurrection, says one theologian, is not a promise of more life, not a promise of a continuation of life, certainly not a life as we know it and can somewhat understand it. But at the heart of resurrection is a promise of the presence of God. At the heart of resurrection, if not its logic, is a promise of the presence of God, a promise that we and our loved ones remain the apple of God's eye, that we are now and then in the shadow of God's wings. That in this life and in death, we are alive to God, and there is no distinctions of who is worthy and who has shortcomings and how the character of this life will continue in full into the next. It is a mystery. It is not for us to be able to understand entirely. And it is real. And it is present. And the promise is that God is present with us. And the promise is that we are present with God in life and in death and in life again. I have watched people as they are dying, as they are starting their journeys from this life into the next, speak to beings who are not in the room. I have watched people as they are between this life and the next speak to loved ones who had died, and I can see in their eyes that they can see them. And they are so deeply grateful to be seeing them again, deeply grateful, and yet in their hearts not surprised. I have seen people speaking to Jesus and to angels and to divine figures, asking them to take my hand and lead me home, to lift me up and bring me to where you are. I have watched people who are in the journey between this life and the next, with faces radiant with inward peace, even in physical decline and inability, as if light is shining from above and from within them. It is my prayer when I witness that they may be rising up joyful like a bird, and that they may be letting their sorrows and pain go like a leaf. It is my observation, indeed, that they are. How they are is a mystery, not for me, not for us to know so definitely and so clearly and tangibly at this time. We cannot help but wonder who they are talking to and how they see them and what they are feeling like. In my observation, they are at peace with a love that defies and transcends this life. And though our minds cannot help but question, and our hearts cannot help but be restless, perhaps what Jesus is getting at for the Sadducees and all of us listening in on their story today, that perhaps we might not let our questions get the best of us or the best of anyone else, and to honor the possibility of life, to honor the possibility of faith and the hope in resurrection. That is the hope and the faith that where there is love in this life and in the next, there is God. The woman in the Sadducee story does not always know love. Perhaps she does not know it very often, if ever. Let us hope that there was love for her with her first husband, and that there was tenderness among his brothers for her. But in those times and structures of society, she had no agency of her own. She could not choose who she would marry, but had to be passed on one to the next, and likely was scorned because she did not bear any children in any of those 7 marriages. As a widow and without children, she was in that time among the lowest of the low. Thus, the Sadducees ask, if this resurrection is so powerful, how could she, of all people, among the lowest of the low, be raised? And imagine what resurrection feels like for her. A woman trapped in her own society and in her own circumstances, without choices or agency of her own, and possibly without even love in her life. Being told day in and day out that she is without worth. Imagine her finally arriving in a place where her worth and her belovedness do not depend on her husband or her fertility or anything she does or does not do. Imagine her basking in the safe, unconditional, and eternal love of the God who created her. Imagine. And so, if our questions and our objections about faith would lead us to and require us to invalidate the lived experiences of actual people who are hurting and who are grieving and who are suffering in this life, whose hearts are broken and know quite a lot about pain and injustice. If our questions were to get so far ahead of ourselves and of them that we would not listen and would in fact invalidate their experiences, then Jesus says, we are on the wrong track. We are asking the wrong questions and favoring the wrong objections. The children of resurrection are children of love, and the mystery and the truth is that where there is love, there is God. We don't know how. We do not know why. And maybe, Debbie Thomas points this out too, maybe resurrection makes the most sense to those of us who are bearing those broken hearts, who are witnessing injustice made, who know something about what it is to be broken. Maybe resurrection makes the most sense on some deep level to those who most desperately need it and do not have privilege to imagine otherwise. Resurrection is living in circumstances that should render living impossible. Resurrection is enduring and overcoming and persisting and surviving. Resurrection is rising up when it is most unlikely. Resurrection is love and love and love again. At the heart, in our hearts seeking resurrection, is not a promise of more life as we know it, of more logic that we can follow. It is a promise of the presence